Hello! This is our bonus episode completely dedicated to our thoughts on the TV adaptation of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. If you came here directly from part 2 of our recap episode, you might want to skip to around 7:15, 7:30, since we do replay a little bit of our spoiler-free thoughts at the beginning to make this whole episode more cohesive as a standalone. But do be warned, the majority of this episode has spoilers for the entire TV series. So if you don't want those, then please pause this and go listen to other Nostalgia Clip content. But if you're in the right place, enjoy the episode.
You're listening to Nostalgia Club, the podcast where we look back on our favorite childhood stories and revisit them as adults. At least one of us hasn't read or watched these series, so we also get a first-timer's opinion. Spoiler alert, we will be discussing storylines and future events beyond the first books and episodes, so proceed with caution. What were your overall feelings on the series?
This isn't a podcast about adaptations, necessarily, but I feel we must discuss this specific adaptation, because not only was Percy Jackson such a big part of our lives, but we did end the previous Percy Jackson episode with a wish for the adaptation to succeed. And so now we must follow up.
Yeah.
My feelings can be summed up in one sound, and that sound is, You know?
That feels about neutral when it comes to adaptations. For people who are fans of the original, like, baseline is just like,
Yeah. I can't say I'm disappointed, but I can't say I'm not disappointed, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think my expectations were too specific, perhaps, too tailored, too high, maybe. And the product that came out wasn't bad, but it wasn't my show. And it wasn't what I wanted, but just because it wasn't what I wanted doesn't make it
Bad.
Unenjoyable.
Yeah.
There were lots of changes, more changes than I ever would have expected. Many of the changes perplexed me. Some of the changes made lots of sense to me. Some of them were for correcting story mistakes in the original Percy Jackson book that you can look over because it's in a book form and your imagination kind of takes over.
Yeah.
Some of them were for the constraints of television. Some of them, I don't know why they did it. And it just bamboozles me. And I can list specific examples if we want. If we want to stay spoiler free, I can just leave it at that. But at the end of the day, I have to say, I wish the actors and the team the best, but I can't say I'm super excited about season 2. I'm glad they got it, but clearly this is not my show, and that's okay.
Well, that's a valid take. It's a very self-aware one is the thing. A lot of people will basically have your take, but they'll project like their own like lack of like exuberance onto the production and be like, this was a mess. And it's like, no, it just wasn't your thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a valid take, but you know, you're doing like what should be considered the normal thing, the healthy thing, and being like, like recognizing like, I guess it's just not for me for one reason or another.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad too, because I really wanted it to be for me.
Oh, of
If
course.
it was like random show from property I've never read and I go, oh, it's not my thing, then I would just move on. But I have such a deep love for the Percy Jackson world that the fact that there's a part of it that I can't interface with the same way I interface with the rest of it is, you know, sad for me. This isn't like End of Heroes of Olympus, like, it was a, wow, what was that? Like, I still really love the series.
Yeah.
This was just like oh man, dang. Well.
No, I get that. I have that for various other properties.
Like you said, Victoria, the danger of adaptation is at the very end not a loss.
Yeah.
And yet, still, I feel a loss.
Yeah, as I say that, I think Percy Jackson kind of was like in a different category because there's never been a good adaptation for Percy Jackson. I enjoyed watching the show. I think the cast did an amazing job. Those kids, they're so good. I think for me, it was mainly the pacing, and it was like overscored.
But also, none of the score was good.
Just a lot of music in places where it didn't feel like it needed music, but then when there was music, it felt like almost like a backdrop.
Yeah. You want an iconic Percy Jackson theme. You want Percy's theme, you want Annabeth's theme, you want Grover's theme. You want to hear great epic music when they fight something. You want to be called back by maybe like a Sally theme or something. You want motifs in a show like this, in a fantasy adventure show. You want motifs, or at least you want something memorable.
Something almost like romantic in style.
You want to be able to hum the Percy Jackson music. And
which
yet,
I can do for the Chris Columbus movie.
Yes, and for the show, I can't.
Aww.
Even while listening to it. I'm sure Victoria will agree.
I can't recall any music from the show.
It felt like stock music.
Yeah.
Which sucks.
The highlights for me, Sally Jackson.
Sally Jackson.
Sally Jackson. The things that they added for her, because like in the book, she's barely there because she's like there for a minute and then she gets whisked away to the underworld. But they added a lot of scenes with her. Like you get to see her struggle with like this difficult decision of like, how do I raise Percy and keep him safe?
From her perspective.
Yeah, from her perspective.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. All of my favorite moments involve Sally Jackson. Yeah. I thought Luke's actor did, like, there were some scenes with Luke that were really interesting. Definitely, like, the cast, I think, like, kept me tuned in for the rest of the series. But similar to Jino, I was just kind of like, it was okay. I had fun, but overall, like, I wasn't like, yeah, like, that was, like, the best they could have done. But that's okay.
Yeah. If we're talking about favorite parts, the Minotaur fight, besides the modern Hollywood impulse of make it as dark as possible, we can't see anything.
I watched the Minotaur fight twice, and I was still like, I don't really know what happened.
But beyond that, I think the choreography and just the feeling of stakes in that fight, I think they really sold it. I think that was the coolest they could have made it while also keeping it PG.
Yeah. I will say, because I watched the behind-the-scenes featurette for the Percy Jackson show, and I really appreciate that they did a lot of practical effects. And for the car scene, like, they fully, like, rigged the car and, like, had the actors in it, and, like, they moved the car around. Like, they were, like, really in it. And they did a lot of, like, practical makeup effects and stuff, too, that, like, I feel like nowadays sometimes they're just like, we'll just CGI all of it. So I appreciated that a lot, and watching the behind-the-scenes gave me that, like, like, filmmaking is so cool feeling again. It's clear that the people who worked on it were very dedicated and they loved it a lot. So, like, I'm excited for season 2 in that way, because I'm like, it's cool that a lot of people are going to get to, like, do it again.
I hope we get justice for the yacht. I hope we get a big cruise ship.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, I really hope they make it a cruise ship.
When I saw that season 2 announcement, I thought of you, Michael. I thought of the yacht and I thought of the cruise ship. And I was like, justice for Michael and his dinky little yacht.
Yeah.
I have hope. But I'm very curious now because the both of you like saw the full show. So, I mean, we discuss spoilers of all kinds of things on the show, except when we don't, but that's very specific. I'm comfortable if the listener is comfortable. Are you comfortable? Are you settled in? That's good.
Tell us in the comments if you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Let me check.
Give us a review on Apple Podcasts saying if you're comfortable or not.
Now, you can't just think about it. You actually have to do it. Come on. All right. Well, we'll just go ahead.
Well, so it'll come in. You've given very, like, cohesive overview thoughts on it. But talk to me about details, things that were changed. And even if you want to, because you've been very like, these thoughts are like very well formulated. But I've also been in places where I've like watched something and I've been like, I didn't vibe with this. I don't know why exactly.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit like that where like after I finished the show, like I was like, it didn't land for me, but I'm not 100% sure why. But it's also like, I do want to reread the original Lightning Thief again because it's been a while since I've read it. Like, I legitimately had to be like, I totally forgot that they had Percy's stepdad give him the prophecy in the first book. The Oracle, when she speaks, it projects an image of Gabe and his poker buddies. And the poker buddies all give Percy the prophecy. But I totally forgot about that. So like when it happened in the show, I was like, whoa. But like in that case, it was like they were being faithful to like the original. I just forgot that that's what the original was.
I do have a specific change. I don't know if they made intentionally. And it's a big change. The world isn't dangerous. The gods are not threatening. Gabe is not evil. The kids never really truly feel like they're in danger. There are some moments that they do feel like they could get hurt, but the stakes of the world, not the stakes of the plot, the stakes of the world don't feel real. Whenever there's a god on scene, they're funny or they're relatable or they're making a joke. They're just a guy. Even Ares, when he gets mad, he's scary because he's an adult man yelling at a child. He's not scary because he's a god, right? And similarly, Gabe is not an obstacle because he's a terrible, abusive, neglectful person. He's an obstacle because he's a goofy guy, right?
Yeah, I think it's just like they had to like tone it down for like Disney. And as a result, everything just gets
sanitized.
Yeah.
And you get why they did it because it's Disney and it's a kid's show, but it lost so much character. And I feel like the performances suffered because of it. Again, these are fantastic actors and they did a really amazing job. But when you pull that all away, you pull that all out. And then because of that, you have to find your stakes in other places.
Yeah.
And it's just like a butterfly effect. Man, I just wanted to see Dionysus get angry. I wanted to feel scared of him. I know why they made Hades just like, I'm a little guy. Whoops, I wear satin slippers. Like, I know why
Hades
they did that.
was like, whoa.
Because they needed to differentiate him from Kronos. They needed to make him as distinct as possible. So when the bait and switch happens, when the reveal happens, oh, it wasn't Hades, it was Kronos. Like, it's really clear to the audience. And I get why they did it. But it just pulls out all of the menace, all of the danger, even all of the ancient exhaustion. I talked to people about this. I think the game Hades was one of the reasons why they changed Hades.
Interesting.
Because in the game Hades, you have this huge, dangerous man who has been reduced to a tired, overworked, bureaucratic father because of the exhaustion it takes running, the effort it takes to run the underworld. He's doing paperwork. He doesn't have time for his kids. He's grumpy, not because he's naturally grumpy, because he's just overworked. That's kind of the Hades that's in the Percy Jackson book. And you can't do that again because the game did it. So here's Satin Slippers Hades, which is fine, but it's not scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really excited for them to get to the underworld and have that confrontation with Hades. And I was just kind of like, what's happening?
Yeah, it feels like the kids can just walk around anywhere and get themselves out of anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like they're struggling necessarily. The only exception was Lance Reddick as Zeus, because they gave him that moment. They gave him a moment to be terrifying.
Zeus had like a really good like, whoa, he's gonna like kill these kids.
Incinerate you.
Yeah.
And you feel it. But he's the only one. And it's far too late. That's the biggest gripe I have with the show. And again, I get why they did it, but
yeah.
I mean, it's like middle grade, mid-2000s books, trying to be edgy, trying to get the kids interested in your dangerous world. Oh, we could die. Whoa, I said die, you know? But sanitized.
I understand what you mean. I feel like that's something that I've seen happen or has happened to like adaptations that go to screen, because you have more leeway in page form to be like, and then our main character felt like he could be incinerated at any moment. And when you try to put that to screen, it's a lot more tangible and it could freak a kid out, or at least that's what people presume. And there's, you know, more oversight, more eyes, and ultimately notes and opinions on things like that versus perhaps an editor just kind of reading the words and being like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned, I haven't seen the rest of the show, but that makes sense because that, you know, it affects, like you said, the overall tone of the thing. Because like that is something very unique to the Percy Jackson books, is that feeling of danger. Even when you have Percy being a whippersnapper, Percy's whippersnapperness is him like coming to terms with the fact that he's in this like honestly universally terrifying situation.
Yeah.
And that the world is out to kill him and everyone like him, and he's facing horrible monsters, and he's like, well, I got nothing left to lose, so I'm just going to be a snarky like brat to like this creature that's stumbling toward me on scorpion limbs. And so like that's where a lot of the levity of the books, I guess, comes from.
Yeah.
A lot of the jokes.
It's the ability to be snarky in the face of danger. In the face of this terrible, terrible world, and you're still willing to be sassy. Yeah. On the flip side of that, if I can go on a little bit longer.
Yes.
On the flip side of that, when they toned down the danger of the world, they toned up the character conflict between the main cast in ways that seemed correct for television, maybe, but then again, like a domino effect, required necessary change down the line to where entire scenes were either added or omitted that seemed really out of place. Specifically, I'm thinking about how Percy doesn't like or trust Grover for a while.
Grover lies saying that, yes, Percy, like, pushed Nancy.
In the book, that conflict doesn't exist.
Yeah.
In the book, the reason why they get separated, And I think this is the first instance of why they were like, oh, it works in the book, but not in the show. After the whole school year ends, he doesn't get expelled.
Oh, right.
The school year ends and they say, you're not invited back. Grover and Percy pack their stuff up and they're leaving. And Grover says, hey, or they happen to be leaving in the same direction or whatever. And Grover starts acting really strange. He's acting nervous. He's freaking out because he knows that Percy's, approaching danger. Yeah, on the radar. And Percy's weirded out by Grover. He's got a lot in his mind and he ditches Grover, which is not a hero thing to do, right? And in the book, he explains it as like, I know this is bad. I don't know why I did it, but he was freaking me out and I wanted to be alone, so I just ditched him.
Which felt very real for like the kind of kid he is. Like,
it's more nuanced.
Yeah.
In the show, what that looks like visually maybe is that Grover starts acting up, uses the bathroom, Percy sits a little bit, he thinks, makes a decision, and he just leaves. And the viewer goes, oh, Percy just abandoned Grover. That's an interesting character choice.
Yeah.
But in the show, they were like, let's make this really blatant. Let's make Percy the good guy. Grover does something that seems like a betrayal, and that's why Percy and Grover split.
Yeah. And then they frame it as like Grover had to lie to get Percy kicked out of school so that they could get him to camp faster. Because in the book, after Mrs. Dodds attacks Percy, he has a meeting with the principal, and then they're like, what happened? And Percy is like, I don't know. And then they're like, okay, well, you're just going to continue for the rest of the school year, but then after that, you're not coming back. But it's like a much longer timeline. For TV, they have to like get to it really fast. So like it makes sense, but I think it just felt weird because like Percy then like really doesn't like Grover. Like he doesn't want to like see him or like interact with him. But then like 2 episodes later, like he's like, Grover, you're like my best friend.
Yeah, they have to dedicate time to it, to the resolution now.
Yeah.
In the books, there is conflict between Percy and Grover, but it's a lot more subtle, right? Because they're best friends, they're really tight. Most of it is at first like, you're part of this world, you didn't tell me about this world. There's a lack of communication here. You're half goat. That's crazy. But there's also a little more nuanced conflict, I think. There's a scene where they leave Auntie M's and they're camping out in some kind of park full of trash and they're exhausted. They don't really know what to do. And Grover starts talking about his quest to find Pan.
Yeah.
And he's saying like, you humans are always throwing trash around and stuff. And you get a sense like he's older, he's bitter, he's exhausted, and there is an inherent wedge between him and Percy. Not that he wants it, just because of who he is and what he has to do versus who Percy is and what Percy has to do. And it's really subtle, right? Like Grover plays a spell and knocks Percy out because he doesn't want us to talk about it. And also, again, bringing up older experience the past with Annabeth, the failure to bring Dahlia in and like Luke and stuff. It's less of like we're both kids and you betrayed me. And like, no, you feel Grover's age and exhaustion there. And the show didn't do that. The show was just like, oh, Grover kicked him out. They're angry. Oh no, they're best friends. Like, you get why they did it, but I feel like they could have done it with more nuance.
Yeah.
That's all. I know I'm saying going in circles and circles and circles, but
I know what you mean though. It makes sense. It's like how much you perhaps have time for exploring or trust your like viewership.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is a more nuanced character dynamic to have the conflict be, we have 2 very different life experiences, and there's like parts of like my life that you can't access or understand, which is an inherent like wall versus you lied about the fact that I pushed someone in the fountain. Yeah,
all the conflict in the show is much more in your face. Like, oh, I can't trust you. I don't like you. You don't like me. Well, we're going to butt heads about that. Whereas in the book, it's a lot more subtle.
Yeah.
Victoria, you have any thoughts? Any more thoughts?
I think my biggest disappointment, was that they didn't spend enough time with Luke to like make that betrayal land the way it needed to. In the book, Percy and Luke spend a lot of time together. Luke is the one who teaches him how to fight.
Yeah.
And it's like a big deal. In the show, they had to get to the traveling faster, so they cut that. And I kept being like, oh, I'm really sad that they like cut Percy and Luke fighting. I feel like we don't get enough of Luke. It's not going to land at all when Luke betrays him. And then in the last episode, they start it with Luke and Percy sparring.
Oh.
Like they did something really cool and interesting where they like intercut the scene of them sparring with their actual fight later on. It's like a cool like narrative plot thing that they did.
But it almost feels like they're correcting for something that they didn't include earlier.
Yeah, I just think there still should have been more. Like you didn't get the sense at all that Luke was like a really important person to Percy in the show.
They tell you it, but they don't show you it.
Yeah, because you spend most of the time with Grover and Annabeth. Obviously, you're like, Percy's best friends are Grover and Annabeth, but you don't get any of that with Luke. It's really up to you as the viewer to add in that context almost. I think they were like, well, like people will know that like Luke was really important to Percy. But I'm like, but some people don't know.
And Luke and Annabeth too.
Yes, that was the other big thing. Like huge thing actually, like almost more than them leaving out Luke and Percy's relationship is that Luke and Annabeth hardly have scenes together. They're not even in scenes together until the last episode. It's all just like Annabeth is in like the distance doing something, and then Percy's talking with Luke, and Luke is telling Percy about Annabeth. But I didn't get the sense at all that Annabeth is really close with Luke, that she views him as an older brother, like none of that. So that was disappointing. But it's like you have to cut things that like you don't have time for in an adaptation, but you lose so much of that nuance and background.
Like literally no scenes together.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of wild how many times they say the sentence, Annabeth and Luke are very close. And
but
they
you don't
just
even
never
see it.
talk
Like,
to each other.
I even feel like in the rare moments that they interacted, it didn't give me the impression that they were very close either. I think they could have, if they couldn't dedicate like scenes to show that they were close, I feel like the way that they interacted with each other could have at least given that impression. You know, like when you're like really close with someone, like you like your body language around them is different.
Yeah.
But like the only time they're in scenes together, they're like just like standing next to each other, like, okay, cool, like we're chill. Like, I don't know, like
a smile, a handshake, an inside joke.
Inside joke, like all that happens is like when they play capture the flag, like Annabeth is like, cool, you know what you're doing? Luke's like, yep, and then they split up. Like that's basically it.
They're like work acquaintances.
Yeah.
More than they're like family.
Yeah.
They're like us.
No, not even.
Yeah, not even, yeah.
Because we talk to each other.
Yeah, it's so important for future seasons for people to understand how important Luke is to Annabeth. Because so much of her character, like her internal conflict after Luke's betrayal is like, what do I do? This is someone who I trusted, who is like probably the person who knows me the best at this point, and he's done something that I never expected him to do. Also, like, I don't remember how this happens in the book, but after Percy and Luke fight, Annabeth is just like there. She's just like, I watched that all happen, and like, oh, but like I didn't get any feeling that she was like
Suspicious,
or honestly, I didn't feel like she felt hurt by Luke's betrayal. That was like the biggest thing for me. I was like, she's not reacting the way that I thought she would react.
Yeah, they said it like, if you remember in the book, Luke kind of gets Percy by himself. They're just hanging out, and then Luke kind of springs it on him. Or Percy figures it out, and Luke springs it on him. But in the show, and I don't think this was their intention, but it kind of seems like Percy figured Luke out ahead of time, told Annabeth to sneak up quietly, waited for a confession, and then attacked. Which is, I don't think was their intention, but that's what it feels like to me. At least.
Yeah, because it's like, why wouldn't Annabeth have done anything?
Yeah.
Why did she just stand there and like watch? It's also like, is it in the book, if I'm remembering correctly, like, doesn't Percy tell Annabeth that it was Luke and she doesn't believe him at first? Or am I misremembering?
She says, I don't believe you. And then she thinks about it and she says, no, Luke would do that.
Oh, okay.
Because she knows him because they talk.
Yeah, I just like...
Luke and Annabeth not having a relationship is like if Aang didn't waterbend at all in season 1. You know, that's what it's like. It's like a huge thing is missing. And it's not essential to the story, I guess. But like, it'll have massive repercussions for the rest of the story.
Annabeth's relationship with Luke also affects her relationship with Percy later on in the series. It's just like, it's just going to snowball and it's going to be weird.
Because Percy's like, why can't I have what they have? I'm a teenage boy and I don't understand relationships.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it also goes into like what you were saying about like Grover's character. I felt like they lost the nuance of him like regretting so much that he like failed Talia. Just like all these like layers of character.
Grover's whole character is about grief and regret, but also responsibility.
Yeah.
And those three things are all intrinsically tied together for him.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of touch on it in the show, but in the show, his character is mostly Percy, which is like fine, but like, you know, he's not really his own person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, they never say the word Riptide.
Really?
The entire season.
You know what?
They never name his sword.
I wonder if they do that because Riptide's
kill people and are dangerous things. And
It's a sword.
I know, but
It's a really small sword. Percy's going to grow up, and that sword's not going to grow with him.
I did appreciate that they used an actual regular pen. Because in
Yeah.
the movie, they like made it like this like fancy silver like clicky pen. And I was like, that's not Riptide. But then Chiron was just like, here's a pen. And it was just like a regular like Bic pen. And they added like a little gold detailing to it. But it's like really subtle. So I like that.
I did see images of the prop sword, and I think it's like a legit part of like the few things that I have esoteric knowledge about. It looks like basically like Bronze Age, kind of like what the Age of Heroes references, like
Yeah.
time period sort of sword with that sort of leaf shape.
I suppose it's historically accurate, but the book says it's 3 feet long. Let it
And-
be 3 feet long.
Maybe this was Rick being like, okay, so these swords are about like 3 feet long. Okay, so Percy's sword is 3 feet long. And then when they put like an example of a 3 foot long sword in the hand of their like young actor, they're like, oh, that's a little, maybe it's a little too much.
Maybe they'll say it's a magic sword and it grows with him.
Maybe, yeah.
It's growing fast.
The scenes that they filmed at camp were filmed first. But then later on in the series, Walker got taller. And so like there's some shots where he's like clearly a head taller than Annabeth now. But then they're like, hi, he's gonna go back to camp and like shrink like at the end. I thought it was funny. But you know, like the kids are great.
The kids are great.
Yeah.
Couldn't have asked for a better cast.
Perfect casting. And Sally just makes me sad. I'm so sad for her. She's been through so much. I can't wait for her to retire and write
Kill
that book.
Gabe Ugly.
So they didn't.
They didn't.
He dies on accident.
Oh, but he still dies.
He still
Yeah.
dies because, like, you can't, like, not have him die. But because they toned him down, they couldn't justify Sally, like,
murdering him.
him.
Ancient myth style. I don't like you. Death.
Yeah.
They do have Sally divorce him and, like, kick him out. But then, like,
Is it a
It's
Rube
also, like-
Goldberg machine of accidents? That
No, it's a after credit scene.
it's an
He's like,
after-credit
he's walking
scene.
up to the apartment. He's like, I'm a jerk, on the phone or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he walks up to the apartment. I think he's talking with this lawyer or something. And
He's like, she changed the locks. And then someone drops off a package, and he's like, well, I'm going to take their mail since, like, they kicked me out or whatever. And he opens it, and it's Medusa's head. So he, like, dies in the hallway.
And then just like anyone walking by is like, what?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly, right? Like, I just feel like
What's in the
anyone
package?
would just, like, it'd make the news. Be like, people got turned to stone. But,
I'm glad they offed him. They did the right thing.
yeah.
But again, consequences of toning it down. Now they have to do it like this.
Yeah.
And it's not as satisfying because he wasn't evil. He was just annoying.
Yeah.
And he
I
played
think-
online poker, which is not nearly as bad as regular poker. If I could say one more thing.
Yeah.
Too many gods.
Too many gods?
Too many gods.
They
There's like,
did, like, shove a lot of them in there.
there's a lot of like 5 gods to show up and they're just like hanging out.
Oh, that's a lot of gods.
It's a lot of gods. In the book, the gods are like off. They're
Yeah.
like off. They're up there. And when Percy yells at the sky, he's really yelling at the sky. In the show, when he yells at the sky yells back.
Oh, really?
Actually, no, he doesn't yell at this guy. He yells at a guy who's right there. And the guy's like, I'm quirky. I'm a god. Whoa, look at my outfit. Whoa, I'm right here. It looks like you could just punch me and I'd die.
You're talking about
one of me is
Lin-Manuel
Hamilton.
Miranda?
No, I'm talking about Hephaestus.
Oh, right, Hephaestus
He just
is there.
shows up and he's like, whoa.
Really?
Hephaestus shows up in the Tunnel of Love scene.
I heard they changed it.
They really changed it.
Does the throne thing happen in the book? I forgot. Okay.
In the book, there's a big pit, a big empty pit,
Yeah.
big bowl.
It's like a
and there's
trap
boat
for
in the middle.
Ares,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then they get down there and there's spiders. The whole spider thing doesn't happen. Annabeth's not scared of spiders. I think they mentioned it once. And then the spiders come out and Annabeth freaks out and Percy's like, get in the boat, like saves Annabeth, and then summons water. He summons the water. The water rockets them. And Percy's like, I didn't think about the consequences of my actions. And now they're like whitewater rafting towards a big barrier. And Annabeth saves Percy by launching them over the barrier using physics. In the movie... In the show, not the movie. Jino, what are you talking about? Percy sits on a big chair and then turns into gold. And then Annabeth yells at Hephaestus. And Hephaestus is like, I'm sorry. And then Percy's fine.
Yeah. One thing I did like, I thought it was interesting that anytime they encountered monsters, they added like an interesting like nuance to them where a lot of the monsters they talk about, like, monsters aren't always who you think they are or what they seem to be. And like Medusa has a really interesting scene where she talks about like, a lot of people view me as a monster, but I think the monsters really are like the gods who turned me into this. I thought that was like an interesting conversation. It kind of like goes away near the end of the series, but I think like they were like building up just like Percy's perspective on the gods. I thought was really interesting because he kind of wrestles with that a lot, where like he suddenly like launched into this world where like the gods are real, but like he also is angry at them because like his mom has been affected by all of this. And so I think like they're building him towards like season 5 when he like really has to like reconcile with that with like Luke. So I thought that was interesting.
It was. It does make the fact that they cut off Medusa's head a lot.
Yeah.
Because now she's sympathetic. And then they're
That's
just
true.
waving her head around, and you're like, oh, sorry.
I mean, it's like, because they're like, well, she's got more nuance, but she still attacked the kids. So
Gotta
she's
decapitate
still
her
bad. Yeah.
and use her as a weapon.
One thing that translates strangely to visual medium is decapitated head as weapon. That's like a whoa, you know?
They sanitized it by anytime they use Medusa's head,
They don't show the face?
they don't show it. When they pick up the head, she's wearing Annabeth's hat. And so she's invisible. So they're literally just like holding the Medusa head, but there's nothing there. I'm like, Annabeth's hat is going to be like gross and stuff.
Lin-Manuel Miranda was there. Mr. Hamilton was there. In perhaps one of the most scenes, they really do have him there, and he really is there, and they do talk with him. That's really all there is to say about it.
Nice.
Oh, they made the casino boring.
Yeah, the casino was not as exciting.
You remember in the book how it's like, there's a bungee jump and like... And
Oh, yeah, it's insane.
TV budget. They can't do that, obviously.
Yeah.
So they went, let's make a boring casino. And then they did.
It's basically a regular casino, but there's like a VR area and like arcade machines. It's like...
There was no like 70s guy who was like, radical dude. Like, I love this new, brand
Movie
new...
Star Wars.
Yeah,
Apparently
it's
they
crazy.
did put an audio soundbite of someone yelling Bianca. That was like their little like Nico tease or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Props to the sound team.
Yeah, go sound team. Putting in the Easter eggs. So
And Hamilton was there. and they talked with him. And oh boy, did he say
things.
words. And it was a scene where they talked. I'm sorry. He made no difference to the plot. He was just there.
You're just hanging.
Just hanging.
I'm Hermes.
And that wraps up our thoughts on the Percy Jackson series. Do you agree with us? Feel free to let us know. And we'll be back with Season 3 very soon.
Thank you for listening to Nostalgia Club. If you enjoyed the episode, follow us on Twitter @_Nostalgia Club and on Instagram @Nostalgia Club Podcast. Leave a comment, give us a rating, and subscribe. You can also send us an email with your suggestions for what we should review next at nostalgiaclubpodcast@gmail.com.